Hollywood just lost one of its true originals, Diane Keaton, gone at 79, and the world can't stop talking about it. But behind the tributes and headlines lies one moment that's haunting everyone: Christopher Walken's quiet, devastating response. And the eerie scene from Annie Hall fans can't stop replaying. Stay with me, because what you're about to see isn't just nostalgia, it's legacy. What if I told you Hollywood has just said goodbye to one of its true originals? Diane Keaton has passed away at 79, leaving an irreplaceable void in film, fashion, and storytelling. The Oscar-winning force behind Annie Hall didn't just act. She redefined what a leading woman could be: witty, vulnerable, and utterly authentic. Tonight, tributes are flooding in from all corners of the industry, from Steve Martin's heartfelt message to Bette Midler's poignant post, as fans revisit a haunting Annie Hall moment that now feels eerily prophetic. This isn't just about nostalgia. It's about the legacy of a woman who changed Hollywood forever. News of Diane Keaton's passing broke on October 11, 2025. And the wave of emotion that followed was immediate and immense. Within hours, social media became a mosaic of memories. As colleagues and admirers, from Steve Martin to Goldie Hawn, shared stories of her brilliance, Saturday Night Live honored her in classic style: a simple black and white title card, complete with her trademark necktie and unshakable grace. In this feature, we're peeling back both the facts and the feelings. We'll trace how the news was confirmed, revisit Keaton's most defining roles from her Oscar-winning turn in Annie Hall to the timeless characters she brought to life in The Godfather and Father of the Bride, and examine the tributes now shaping her legacy in real time. One reaction, however, stands above the rest. Christopher Walken's, their brief but unforgettable connection on screen has taken on new emotional weight, and fans around the world are waiting for his words. Stay with us as we move through this story, from the timeline of events to the most touching farewells, and finally, to the questions left behind. What Diane Keaton's final days were like, and which legacy projects may soon emerge to honor her life's work. Confirmation of her death came swiftly. By the evening of October 11th, major news outlets, including AP, Reuters, and CBS, had verified that the 79-year-old Oscar winner had died in California. Early headlines focused on the essentials: her age, her monumental career, and her place among Hollywood's greatest. Keaton was a four-time Academy Award nominee, winning Best Actress in 1978 for Annie Hall. Beyond acting, she reshaped fashion forever. Her androgynous, menswear-inspired style became a cultural signature that influenced generations. As obituaries and retrospectives emerged, a fuller portrait of Keaton's life began to surface. Born Diane Hall in Los Angeles in 1946, she adopted her mother's maiden name early in her career and transitioned from stage to screen in the late 60s. Though she never married, she built a family of her own, adopting 2 children later in life. She also spoke candidly about her health challenges, including her battles with bulimia and skin cancer, sharing her truth with the same honesty that defined her work. Those details, now resurfacing across countless tributes, paint a portrait of a woman who lived fearlessly, loved deeply, and left behind an indelible mark on every frame she touched. By evening, the tributes had taken on a new urgency, sharper, more reflective. Colleagues spoke of Diane Keaton's unmatched wit and courage, of how she reimagined what an American leading lady could be. She was sharper, stranger, and more emotionally layered than the archetypes Hollywood had grown comfortable writing. To her peers, she wasn't just an actress, she was an architect of possibility. Observers also noted how her creative reach stretched far beyond acting. Keaton had built second and third lives as a director, photographer, home renovator, and author, always guided by an insatiable curiosity that never dimmed. Then, a single question began trending: what will Christopher Walken say? Across social media, fans revisited the now legendary Annie Hall dinner scene, a brief, haunting 2 minutes where Walken, playing Annie's brother Dwayne, confesses his bizarre urge to steer into oncoming traffic. It's darkly funny, deeply human, and unforgettable. As people reposted the clip, they weren't just quoting lines. They were waiting for Walken's words. While condolences poured in from across Hollywood, one tribute loomed large, as not simply because of Walken's enduring fame, but because his brief on-screen exchange with Keaton had captured something quintessential about her artistry: the way she could turn fleeting moments into cinematic eternity. Steve Martin, her longtime friend and collaborator, posted a black and white photo of their hands intertwined, captioned simply, "We lost an original." Bette Midler, Goldie Hawn, Whoopi Goldberg, Jeff Goldblum, and Meryl Streep joined the flood of remembrance, each sharing stories of Keaton's warmth, humor, and fearless creativity. Goldie Hawn's tribute struck a chord, a photo of her and Keaton in matching white shirts, smiling like time had stood still. Her caption read, "Diane lit up rooms. She made you feel safe to be weird. I'll miss her deeply." Meanwhile, fashion editors and film critics returned to the moment Keaton revolutionized style through Annie Hall. Her tie vest and crisp trousers weren't costume choices. They became cultural symbols, declarations of individuality. Publications like Vogue, Vanity Fair, and the New York Times ran tributes tracing how her singular fashion sense reshaped not only wardrobes but ideas of femininity itself. Yet, not all tributes looked backward. Some carried a quiet worry. What was Diane working on before she passed? Were there unfinished projects, private journals, or unseen interviews that might offer one last glimpse into her mind? The speculation carried both hope and heartbreak, a hunger to hear from her, even now. Then, at last, came Christopher Walken's statement. After several days of silence, he released a short but profoundly moving message. Diane was luminous, brave, funny, always surprising. I'm deeply grateful for the time we shared. That single paragraph spread like wildfire. Variations of it surfaced online, with fans pairing his words to the Annie Hall dinner sequence. In those 2 minutes of film, Walken's confession and Keaton's subtle reaction, a half smile, a nervous laugh, eyes flickering with empathy seemed to encapsulate everything she represented. Humanity, humor, and emotional truth without pretense. The clip flooded timelines once more. Fans called it the most human moment in Annie Hall, and perhaps in all of Keaton's career. She had an uncanny ability to turn awkwardness into tenderness, melancholy into charm, and fear into something strangely funny. Critics once said she wasn't playing Annie Hall, she was Annie Hall. Now, decades later, that same scene feels like a quiet elegy for her soul, curious, perceptive, and endlessly alive to the inner lives of others. Walken himself once described that moment as sacred. In a 1990s interview, he recalled that Keaton's presence grounded the chaos of Woody Allen's improvisational style. She made the set feel like home, even when it was madness, he said. Today, those words read like a gentle farewell from a man rarely open about loss. Cultural historians often remind us that Annie Hall didn't just redefine romantic comedy, it redefined emotional realism. Before Keaton, Hollywood love stories were tidy and glossy. She made them messy, real, human. Her chemistry with Walken, however brief, symbolized that shift. Ordinary people wrestling with extraordinary feelings. That's why the dinner scene resonates so deeply now. In recent days, fans have edited montages pairing that moment with Keaton's interviews on mortality and legacy. In one 2014 profile, she said, "I think about death all the time. But I I'll leave something that still feels alive." That line now circulates beside Walken's tribute to fragments of time that, together, feel like an unfinished conversation finally completed. Few realize that Keaton's link to Annie Hall was deeply personal. The character was modeled on her name, her wardrobe, even her real-life romance with Woody Allen. And years later, Christopher Walken would add one final, unexpected layer. In a rarely discussed 2012 film comment interview, Walken reflected on her impact with words that now sound prophetic. She made silence feel full. Filming Annie Hall was like playing inside a jazz song, and Diane was the melody. Those remarks, resurfacing after her death, now feel like a love letter written long before goodbye. Friends close to both actors say their connection was brief but meaningful. A meeting of two souls who recognized in each other something unspoken and rare. After Annie Hall, Diane Keaton and Christopher Walken rarely crossed paths. They weren't close off set, but when their orbits did intersect at premieres or awards shows, there was always a moment, Walken's quiet nod across the room. It wasn't showmanship, it was his language of respect. One Vanity Fair editor once recalled how Walken paused mid-interview just to watch Keaton enter a crowded event. "That's a star," he whispered, not as a compliment, but as a statement of fact. After her death, Walken's circle described him as heartbroken but grateful, his brief written statement echoing what insiders had long known. He deeply admired Keaton's spontaneity, her courage, and her refusal to bend to anyone's idea of who she should be. Then came a private line, never meant for publication, that leaked through a source close to Variety. "I always thought Diane was acting for the future, not for the audience in front of her. but for the ones who hadn't been born yet? That single sentence lit up the internet. Film students, critics, and lifelong fans began quoting it as the truest summation of Keaton's legacy. Because Walken was right. Diane never followed trends. She invented them. Everything about her, her voice, her humor, her clothes, her energy, disrupted Hollywood's formula for femininity. She didn't play women who waited to be saved. She embodied women who saved themselves. What made Walken's tribute even more poignant was how perfectly it mirrored Keaton's own philosophy. In one of her last recorded interviews, she said, "I don't think about being remembered as much as I think about being real. The real is what lasts." Now, both quotes, his and hers, are being shared, side by side. A call and response between two artists who recognized each other's quiet rebellion. As black and white tribute reels filled social media, candlelight edits, montages of her laughter, voiceovers echoing lines from Something's Gotta Give, one truth crystallized. Walken's words hadn't just honored her, they'd given language to what everyone was feeling but couldn't yet articulate. Still, his tribute reopened an old and complicated debate, one that had followed Keaton for decades. Was Annie Hall truly hers, or Woody Allen's? And why did she eventually distance herself from the man who had made her famous? For years, Annie Hall was celebrated as the quintessential romantic comedy, a witty, neurotic dance between intellect and vulnerability. But as Woody Allen's reputation came under scrutiny, the narrative shifted. Keaton's connection to him grew increasingly uneasy. Fans and journalists began asking the difficult question: how could the woman who embodied Annie Hall, who gave her name, style, and soul to the film, remain silent for so long? Diane never publicly condemned Allen, even as allegations resurfaced in the 2000s. When asked by The Guardian in 2020 if she still believed in him, her answer was characteristically restrained. "I have my memories, and I'm grateful for them. That's all I can say." It was classic Diane, poised, ambiguous, emotionally intelligent. Yet that restraint became part of her mystery. Behind the scenes, friends revealed she had quietly pulled away from him long before the controversies. Cinematographer Gordon Willis once observed, "Diane couldn't stay in Woody's orbit forever. She was too restless, too alive." By the 1990s, she had already built a new identity as a director, writer, and performer. She explored the realities of middle-aged womanhood with wit and warmth. From Baby Boom to Something's Gotta Give. Keaton's restraint about Allen wasn't avoidance, it was evolution. She said it best herself in a 2018 Variety interview, "I'm not interested in correcting the past, I'm interested in living differently now." Today, those words feel like a farewell not to Allen, but to the version of herself that once existed in his shadow. And in an unexpected way, Walken's tribute underscored that transformation. His line about her acting for the future reframed her story entirely. It wasn't about who discovered her, it was about how she kept rediscovering herself. Even her fashion, once dismissed as quirky or eccentric, is now recognized as radical. Those oversized blazers, wide-brimmed hats, and vests weren't just a look. They were defiance, a declaration of a quiet rewriting of what femininity could mean on screen, in life and in death. Diane Keaton evolved from muse to author, from actress to architect of her own mythology, and as critics revisit her filmography, they are finally doing so through her lens, not Woody Allen's. What emerges is a portrait of an artist defined not by controversy, but by curiosity, courage, and the quiet, enduring power of reinvention. As fans revisit Diane Keaton's final interviews and sift through whispers of unfinished projects, one haunting question lingers. Did she know her time was near? There are traces of foresight in her last words, in the tone of her final public appearances, and in a cryptic line she shared just months before her death. In her final year, Keaton seemed especially introspective. She never spoke of illness, but her interviews carried a subtle current of closure, a gratitude that felt final. At a charity gala in Los Angeles in March 2025, she told Variety, "I'm just thankful, I got to do it my way. I wore what I wanted, loved who I could, and laughed the rest off." At the time, it sounded like her trademark humor. In hindsight, it feels like a soft goodbye. Those close to her say she had quietly stepped back from Hollywood's pace. Most of her days were spent at her Brentwood home, surrounded by her art, her memories, and her rescue dogs. A neighbor recalled seeing her each morning, coffee in hand, strolling through her garden, no makeup, wide-brimmed hat, that same unmistakable smile. In those months, Keaton was said to be organizing her journals, decades of handwritten notes and reflections that may soon become a posthumous book or documentary. Her final Instagram post, just days before her passing, showed a black and white photo of an old oak tree. The caption read, "Everything changes. That's the beauty of it." After the news broke, fans flooded the comments, turning the post into a digital shrine. Her daughter, Dexter, reshared it with a single heart emoji. No words. Because none were needed. Tributes since have carried a near-religious reverence. Younger stars like Emma Stone and Florence Pugh called her the blueprint. Veterans such as Meryl Streep and Jane Fonda praised her courage to remain authentic in an industry built on imitation. On TikTok, a new wave of fans resurrected her signature Annie Hall look under hashtags like #KeatonCore and #ForeverAnnie, celebrating not just her style, but her spirit. Then came the moment that broke everyone. The Academy's In Memoriam reel, a clip from Something's Gotta Give, filled the screen. The scene where she weeps at her typewriter after heartbreak. As her image slowly faded, the theater rose in a standing ovation. Near the front, cameras caught Christopher Walken wiping away tears. He said nothing afterward. He didn't have to. That quiet gesture said more than any speech could. Because Diane Keaton's passing isn't merely the loss of a beloved actress, it marks the end of a particular kind of artistry. She made intelligence magnetic, imperfection beautiful, and sincerity fashionable again. She reminded us that power doesn't have to shout. Vulnerability isn't weakness. And humor can heal without cruelty. Her absence leaves a silence only her own voice could fill, but her influence lives on in every performance that embraces awkwardness. In every woman who dares to dress in every artist who chooses authenticity over approval. From The Godfather to Annie Hall, from heartbreak to hilarity, Diane Keaton lived as a true original, one who turned honesty into art. And perhaps, Christopher Walken said it best, she was acting for the future. That future is now. Every performer, creator, and dreamer who refuses to fit a mold carries her spirit forward. So if you ever laughed, cried, or felt seen because of Diane Keaton, this is your moment to honor her. Rewatch your favorite film. Share the quote that stayed with you. Whisper the line that made you smile when you needed it most. Because Diane's story doesn't end here. It continues, in courage, in laughter, and in every heart she taught to be unapologetically itself.